those that have not had the honor of attending our wonderful meetings here. The way things work is once we're done going over the roll call and approving the minutes from the last meeting, city staff will present on an item. Once they're done with their presentation, we open it up just to the commission for what we call technical questions. After we're done with our questions, we pull it back, and then we open it up to the public. If you have something to say, please step up to the microphone and state your name and address so we have that for the minutes. After public discussion is covered, then we come back to the commission for discussion and usually a vote. We also ask that you turn off your cell phones or turn them on silent so that they don't distract the meeting. And with that, let's do the roll call.
David Borsak.
Present.
Ed Bowen. Jeffrey Tomes.
Here.
Thomas Freitag.
Here.
John Hintz.
Here.
Steve Cummings. Bob.
Here.
Kathleen Proud. Barry Gray.
Here.
Donna Laurie. Carl Nolenberger.
Here. Okay, approval of the minutes from September 16th. Do we have any additions, corrections, deletions, improvements?
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, seeing none, the motion clearly passes. Move on to item number 1, vacation of Michigan Street right-of-way north of West 4th Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You are welcome.
Last month, you reviewed and approved a conditional use permit and plan development plan for some park improvements west of the former Boatworks property along our new segment of Riverwalk that's currently being constructed. Part of that plan called for the vacation of some right-of-way, and now we're moving forward with that vacation request. The request is for the vacation of Michigan Street north of West 4th Avenue, which is highlighted up on the screen here. The section to be vacated is approximately 560 feet north, or wide, or long, by 60 feet wide and approximately 0.77 acres in area. The west, typically with the vacation, it's split down the middle and conveyed to property owners on both sides. In this case, the west half of the vacation will be conveyed to a city-owned property, which is currently the sanitation facility, and a small portion of vacant city-owned land, while the east half of the vacation will be deeded over to the former Boatworks property, which is currently owned by the City of Oshkosh Redevelopment Authority. The plan called for, well, once the vacation goes through and is approved, the RDA and city is going to have a CSM prepared to re-divvy up this land, creating a separate parcel containing the Public Works facility, using, I believe, most of the portion of vacated Michigan Avenue for access to the park area and restroom facility and the boat launch and Riverwalk, while a new parcel will be created for the redevelopment authority for marketing of the former Boatworks property for redevelopment. The Department of Public Works reviewed this and doesn't have concerns, but they did note that there are several active city facilities in there, including sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and water main. Per state statute, the city will continue to have legal access into this area. Whenever right-of-way is vacated, cities still have rights to go in there for maintenance, construction, or repair of the facilities. Therefore, no easements can be required for this. The RDA staff reviewed this proposal and agrees with the city that this is the best approach for the park redevelopment and redevelopment of the remnant parcels. And staff is in support of this request, as this is another piece of our continuing redevelopment efforts on the south shore of the Fox River. So we're recommending approval of the vacation as requested.
Thank you. Technical questions, Jeff?
Jeff, is that planned just to be a walkway?
I believe it's going to be part of the driveway leading from West 4th Avenue to this parking area.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. Why can't we keep this for the landscaping and the new building that we just approved 2 weeks ago? I mean, it seems like we're turning off street and then we're putting in street. You know, and I was just wondering why we couldn't keep the street and use it for the shelter restroom building and also the drive around.
It will be serving as a driveway yet. When you vacate the road right away, it helps alleviate setback issues.
I'm sorry, it's what? I didn't understand what he said.
Instead of setbacks being from the road right-of-way line, the new right-of-way line, well, there won't be a right-of-way line anymore, but there will be a property line. I don't have a copy of the draft CSM yet, but
Okay.
it helps with setbacks.
Okay, thank you.
One more question. Whose responsibility then will it be to maintain that road that's left?
The portion leading from here is probably going to be up to the City Parks Department, because it's going to be incorporated to this parcel up here. It's going to be kind of like a lollipop shape.
Even
Parcel.
though it's half redevelopment and half
The
city?
Once the CSM's drawn up, I believe the lot line is going to be east of the current roadway.
So the portion that's for the redevelopment that will be
Correct.
part of the CSM to give them back to the city?
Yes, and I believe the city is going to grant a easement to give the Boatworks property legal access onto their property from this side.
Other technical questions? Seeing none, anyone here from the public to speak to this item today? Seeing none, back to the commission.
Approve. Second.
Questions on the motion? Okay, now let's call a roll.
Weigert,
Aye.
Nolenberger,
Aye.
Borzak,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Hintz,
Aye.
Crop. Aye. Gray,
Aye.
Wojciech.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
Okay, let's move on to item number 2, land disposition of Outlot 3, River Mill subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In July of this year, Michael Weber, owner of 1695 River Mill Road, contacted the city about the possible purchase of a city-owned outlot, which is located east of his property. Up on the screen, I have an aerial photo showing the subject site and the requester's property right here. Back when this was platted in 1985, I'm going to bring up a original plat of the subdivision. When this was platted, there was a existing railroad line that ran through the development, and as a result of that, several outlots were created running through the property. There were chunks of land deemed undevelopable. So after the railroad line was removed and vacated, the railroad deeded the land to the city, and over the years, the city has been either selling off these outlots to adjacent property owners, or portions of them have been created or morphed into road right-of-way, and then this outlot 1 over here was refurbished as part of the Wayawash State Trail. Outlot 3 is the last remaining outlot that's kind of in this area of the plat. Let me go back to this photo here. Here's kind of a nice shot of it, looking from the east to, or I'm sorry, from west to the east here. Ever since this house was built, the property owner here has historically been maintaining this property, landscape, well, no landscaping, but maintaining the lawn, where technically the city is technically responsible for maintenance of this, and also including the sidewalk. The property owner approached the city and has agreed to take on that responsibility by acquiring the property. So staff does not have any concerns with the disposition of the land. Currently, it serves no real purpose to the city, and the city would no longer be responsible for the maintenance of sidewalks, snow removal, and so on. The Department of Public Works reviewed this request and does not have any issues with the disposition. It's kind of hard to see on this. Let me see. Go back here. There is an existing storm sewer inlet and easement which kind of buffers around this little portion right here. And the way the approved grading and drainage plan works, water from this island of land here runs and channels up and down through Outlot 3 into this inlet, which is currently on his property. So the Department of Public Works is recommending that a drainage and grading easement be placed all over Outlot 3 to ensure that the grading and drainage plan continues to function. So with that, staff is in support of the disposition of Outlot 3 in River Mills subdivision with 3 conditions. Condition 1, Outlot 3 shall be attached to, there's a typo up on the screen and as well as your staff report, but shall be attached to 1695 River Mill Road. It should be 95 instead of 96. Condition 2, Outlot 3 shall continue to function as part of the approved grading drainage plan, like I briefly showed you up on the screen. And then there's a little miscommunication with the last condition. Instead of the easement being extended to cover the existing storm sewer inlet, it should be worded, a new grading and drainage easement shall be placed all over Outlot 3. So
That it?
that is it.
All right, technical questions. Yes, Kathy?
And I think what you said is effectively the property owner won't be able to put anything, any structures on this area.
No structures.
Or maybe even landscaping, because it shouldn't interfere with the drainage.
Steve, do we generally allow light landscaping in these features, or?
Perennials.
Basically the swale, what we're going to be not wanting to see is mulch or low-growing vegetation that's going to hang up water flow. If someone wanted to put some shrubs on a portion of it that was, or tree outside of where basically the drainage channel is, we're not going to have a significant issue with that at all getting in there. So they could do some light landscaping, but landscaping the whole thing is probably not going to be realistic.
How do we prevent that then?
Yeah, how do we enforce that, or?
That would be part of the easement, is nothing can be put in the easement without the Department of Public Works approval.
Oh, okay, all right.
Thank you. Other technical questions? Seeing none, is there anybody from the public to speak to this item? Here for that? Okay, come back to the commission.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Call the roll.
Weigert,
Aye.
Mullenberger,
Aye.
Wolsak,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Hens,
Aye.
Crop,
Aye?
Gray,
Aye.
Wojtek.
Aye.
Motion carried 8-0.
All right, let us move on to item number 3, which we have seen before. Plan development amendment at 3735 South Washburn Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned before, this is a revisitation of a previous item that we had actually on July 1st of this year. Just to give everybody a brief description of what this was about again, the subject property was found to be in noncompliance for the design of the stormwater detention facility in the front yard. In addition, we also found that the landscaping around the facility was not designed properly and implemented. So the subject property, located near northwest corner of Ripple and South Washburn Street, is within the 3,000 block of South Washburn. It's approximately 4.3 acres in size, and it's designated as a light industrial district, or M1PD. This is the home of the Big Rig Chrome Shop, as everybody remembers from before. Just a little bit more background information about it. On August 21st of 2012, a plan development was approved for this construction of that facility, with the number one point being natural style of detention basin be utilized, involving planting of emergent plants in the safety shelf area and native plants around the side slopes. In addition to that, we also had some requirements or conditions for some of the building materials, the driveway locations, and things like that. The one that's in reference today is just that item number 1 on it. To date, all of those other conditions have been met with the exception of that one. The applicant requested a plan development amendment, and that's what we saw on July 1st in response to that correction. Basically, he requested, or the applicant requested, that the development be constructed or allowed to stay as is, with the natural style of plantings not utilized and the riprap implementation instead. So this was the actual approved landscape design that happened. Some of the things, again, that were not followed were the landscaping around the transformer, which was in essence, or which in reality was brought to the front of the building because of the requirements that was needed through WPS. It was not landscaped appropriately, nor was all the landscaping around the building implemented. And then lastly, the front area and adjacent to the detention basin was not implemented correctly. Again, the primary concern was the use of riprap instead of the natural plantings on the safety shelf and the side slopes. So on that July 1st meeting, Plan Commission did make the motion to deny that request. It was followed at 2-6, and the feeling was that with the plan not being followed and the PD not being followed correctly, we should not show leniency in this regard. It should be implemented the proper way. Following that decision, it did go to Common Council, and Common Council did review the item and felt that the item should be brought back to Plan Commission for further review. They felt that because there was some concerns about what should be and what should not be done within the PD process on what the natural planting should look like, it was then felt by Common Council to bring it back and work on a compromise, a way for the Plan Commission and the city to work with the business owner to develop a compromise. So like I said before, 3 major sections of the landscaping plan were not followed. To date, the petitioner, the applicant, has followed through with all of the landscaping requirements around the building and around the transformer pad. He's properly screened it with the landscaping required, and all the building has had the proper landscaping put in. So he has showed his extreme willingness to work with us on that regard. We sat down in-house and looked at ways that we could fix this issue, because it is a concern that how do we go forward from here when the council said, let's provide a compromise. Well, working with that, we really came up with 4 new things that we can do to change the front. And before I get too far, I wanted to just bring you a little bit more detail about what natural style landscaping is versus what would be considered evasive or non-desired landscaping that sometimes coincides with these. In addition, I want to bring up the riprap issue and give a little bit more history about what these stormwater detention basins are looking like and what we as a city and city planning staff has felt natural landscaping should look like. So when we go further into it, this is again what it looks like right now. And some additional shots, you can see all the amount of riprap. This is not considered natural landscaping at that point. When we go a little further into it, this is the UW Oshkosh detention basin. It's located at High Avenue and Vine. When we look at what natural landscaping is, it doesn't necessarily mean just lily pads or wildflowers. It can be appropriate landscaping uses. So when we look at these images, we can see that it's properly landscaped with bushes, hedges, decorative grasses, landscaping, mulch in this regard, in addition to other sorts of wildflowers. So it is more than just what would be considered a wildflower garden around it, or just the use of grasses and things like that. Going a little further into it, this is another image of another one that's in the UW area. This is on Cherry Street. You can see the use of decorative stones instead of riprap. These are more of the Riverwalk style stone to go down some of the spillways to help prevent that erosion problem, and then uses of natural plantings within the beds. And just another one, this is near the Oshkosh Center. This is a little bit more interesting. It's not the use of what would be considered more traditional natural plantings. This is actually landscaped with trees and things like that, and the grass was brought all the way down, but the uses of the trees help to mitigate some of those concerns that would happen with erosion. The root systems and things like that help keep the shoreline stable. This is another one. It's a very dark image. I apologize for that. But this is near the Pick and Save on the north side in the Fair Acres Shopping Center. This one is more of what would be considered all of a natural wildflower-based landscaping. Again, the common themes we're seeing here is no cattails or very limited amount of cattails. Cattails are considered something that's evasive and isn't normally implemented within these detention basins. If we remember just recently, the Public Works Department has been focusing on working on the West Haven Pond and how it's inundated with cattails and species that was not intended. It's part of the natural process of developing these basins is that as wildflowers grow up, there is a time where they're not mature landscaping yet, and the use of those cattails unfortunately comes in there, so they did spray that. So when we're looking at these are properly maintained, landscaped detention basins in the area. with the minimal amount of stone or riprap. This is another example, a little bit more, it's more just natural grasses around it. This is in the Oshkosh or Oakwood Road area, Oakwood Avenue. So when we started to get into what the riprap style looks like, this is another one of the ones in the area that has a fence around it. The riprap is all the way down, and we can begin to see how some of these plants you're not able to take care of it properly. One, because of the fence, and two, because the riprap itself, without the natural plantings and some of the other things in that area, or even just the normal turf grass, it's not normally maintained. There's concerns about whether it should be sprayed in there and other things like that. So we begin to see some issues when we see the riprap in the city. Another example that was brought up is Musa. It's a very dark image, but against their new addition to their factory, this is a detention basin area. It's right adjacent to Bowen Street. And again, it's the riprap, but in this case it wasn't properly maintained. So we're beginning to see what we considered a blight in the area, where you're seeing unmaintained landscaping, weeds. Again, the main focus is that these basins and these things are like flower beds. They have to be maintained properly to have them look the way they should be designed and function the way they should be designed. This is one of those where it was brought up at the previous session. One of the members felt that this was one of the examples that wasn't properly done. It is true, this particular one does have large amounts of cattails within the area. This is not within one of the PDs, so we did not require anything with this. This was required based on the requirements for the site plan review, but it was not one of the PDs, so we don't see this at the Plan Commission level. But it is important to note that, again, with proper maintenance, this would look differently. So coming back to Big Rig, as you guys get a little bit more knowledge about what the meaning of that natural planting is, we did compromise, and we have these 4 things that we looked at. We did require that all existing riprap on the north, east, and south sides of the basin be removed from 2 feet above the water line and up, with the exception of the spillway located in the northeast corner. This was a recommendation made by our stormwater department that with the increase of flow in the area, we want to make sure that that bank doesn't erode and we cause bigger issues. Again, the focus is the settlement of sediments and you having the proper functionality of it. A detention basin that's eroding away loses some of that functionality. So we did require that the riprap be removed from 2 feet above that water line and up. We acknowledge that we want to work with Big Rig Chrome on this. And in this case, we felt it was appropriate to compromise and let him keep some of the riprap in there, but remove the vast majority of it. So we can see the increases of the landscaped area on the north and the south with the additional trees and plantings. In addition to that, the natural plantings or turf grass must be planted within the north and south side slopes. No riprap. Again, it's just another addition to that. The third addition was the landscape bed to the east of the pond be increased with additional trees or shrubs to help shield that remaining riprap. The owner of the business has been more than willing to increase the landscaping on the roadside of the basin to help mitigate some of those riprap concerns and the aesthetic quality that we're trying to work with. And additional trees be planted on the north side where the original landscaping plan did require that, but we saw that they were not implemented. The owner, again, is willing to put those trees back in there. So the applicant has stated has provided more than enough willingness to work with the city to develop a formal compromise. And he has already implemented the other pieces of the landscaping plan that were not done initially. So with that being said, staff is making the recommendation to approve the plan development amended as stated at today's meeting with the 4 conditions. We see the 4 conditions on the board. Open it up to the commission.
All right, thank you very much, Ben. Technical questions, Jeff?
Assume you didn't require them to remove on the west side, which the west side being the sides closest to 41.
Mm-hmm.
That's simply because you're putting the landscape out there, simply because it's not going to be exposed.
We required Big Rig Chrome to remove the north, the east, and the south. The west side of the basin, we allowed him to keep that. One of the concerns with that is the way the pond was constructed. That slope is fairly steep, and there were some concerns about whether you'd be able to implement landscaping within that.
So the west side
Thank
is
you.
closest to his building?
Yes, the west side would be the left side of the
That's why
screen.
you're putting the landscape on the east so you can't see that?
Correct. We felt that we can compromise by boosting up the landscaping on the east side to help.
Other technical questions? Go ahead, David, and then Kerry.
A more general question. This is the first time in my experience where somebody's totally disregarded conditions for construction and development, and then came back and threw us, on the mercy of the city. How do we? What is in place that this does not become a habit? That we have somebody that unilaterally says, I don't like what I agreed to, and now comes back and says, I want to change what I agreed to. How do we do this, preventing this from going forward?
Well, like you said, we as staff made the recommendation the first time on July 1st to recommend denial. You as Plan Commission also did that. Council felt that we should be looking at it again and bringing it back. With that being said, we were told to compromise, which we're doing today. How to create this or how to stop this from happening in the future? We've had some very initial discussion in the city about the idea of drafting some sort of requirements for all developments on what we can be doing about these detention basins, more formalized requirements instead of setting more of a standard as we have now, a more detailed plan of it. At this point, it's more of just a discussion. We haven't formulated those points yet, but we're working towards developing a more detailed description of what would need to be done on these basins.
Let me jump in there. It's just tough. I mean, when you move forward and you have an approved plan, and we go through the process like we did in this case, we issued the permit, and it does happen a lot where things get changed in the field, and a lot of times the contractors or somebody won't have contacted us, and we'll have to do that follow-up when we do the final inspection. Now, on a particular project like this, the final inspection is difficult because, or the follow-up sometimes is difficult because at occupancy, a lot of times at occupancy, the landscaping is not in place yet. So we have to put it in a file and get back to it because it's required to be in within, 18 months? 18 months after occupancy. We don't require any bonds that be posted for anything like that. So if we had, if we wanted to get a hold of some of these situations, if we required a developer to give us a bond for the cost of installing the landscaping prior to issuing the building permit, that's a pretty big incentive. I've seen it used in other communities. We've talked about it here, but we've not moved forward with it. The only other thing that we really can do is, potentially hold up occupancy, but again, landscaping's not often there at occupancy, so the other follow-up is potentially to write a citation request. And we try and avoid writing citation requests because we don't like to go to court if we don't have to.
Can't we put stronger language in the PDs that we, we hardly ever see the landscaping.
Kathy's.
Landscaping requirement, we just said it has to meet requirements. Can't we put stronger language in the PDs that make them conform, or you're subject to whatever?
No, technically you're required to conform to whatever's in that PD, and we could, in some cases, we'll require you to have a full landscape plan to be reviewed by you. Now, some of the downsides of that is the developer oftentimes doesn't want to go to the expense of coming and developing a full landscape plan because of the costs. So a lot of times we say if there's a concern, you meet the basic code requirements, and if you want to say we want to put emphasis on this area, the Plan Commission will put a recommendation saying we want extra landscaping along the front or something like that. So yeah, you can do it. It's just a matter of, do we want to require full landscape plans?
Finish your thought.
And I want to expand. I don't want to get hung up on landscaping. We have setbacks. We have
Any condition.
light. Whether it's lighting conditions, setback conditions. So it's more than just. It's a bigger issue of noncompliance to conditions of operation. And so when you look at this, and I would hope that you would accelerate your review of this, that you look at a larger vision. Your vision is larger than just landscape. That these are the current terms and conditions that the owner and the developer agree to, and this is your conditions of operation. Otherwise, you're in noncompliance, and in effect that you're subject to shutdown. I understand, the phase in, but that you don't. But
we could not, David. We're not going to go in there if they're in violation of something. It's very difficult. I'd say impossible for us to shut down an operation without going through the steps of the court processes and all those other things, and then it's potentially dubious. Now, whether we can do it. That being said, we don't run into this situation all that often. I would say, we're 95% plus. Most every project goes through, comes off without a hitch. This is an anomaly. It does not happen that often. We audited the land, and I know we're getting back to landscape plans. We got back and we audited all of our landscape plans for X amount of years, and the compliance rate was very high. So it's an anomaly. It does not happen that much. I think we do a pretty good job of making sure during the site plan review that the appropriate terms and conditions are placed on there. And I think we do have to do a little bit better follow-up at occupancy with some of those other conditions. And now that we have a better system in place, we have more staff in place going forward. I think it's going to get even better. But every once in a while you're going to get these blips. It just does happen every once in a while, and you're not going to prevent it.
Thank you. That's detailed.
Kathy and then Steve.
Okay, in effect, we'll still see a line of riprap. It says remove from 2 feet above the water line and up. So we'll have
An elevation down, correct.
a certain line of riprap. And then if I read this right and figure out what the owner probably wants to do, be planting grass. Turf grass is just grass.
Correct.
Yeah. So, in effect, that negates part of the point of natural plantings, which is filter, to filter the sediment and the runoff. And as it comes down, at least off the parking lot, and I don't know about underground, but the worst thing you can do in terms of trying to prevent sediment entering the water is to just plant grass and just go.
Well, the worst
Runs
thing is to
right
have
off
riprap.
onto the riprap. Well, but it runs right off the grass onto
Yes.
the riprap.
Correct.
And there's no mitigating effect of natural planting. So, however, this condition suggests that we'll look the other way and let him plant grass, which is too bad. And the very good summary you had of how detention basins function. Is this basin going to function appropriately, or will it become kind of lousy by some of the examples that you had shown?
You're talking, well, and Ben will get into it, you're really talking two different issues. One is the environmental end of it, and the environmental end with a full riprap run, you're not getting rid of all the phosphorus and whatever the other point, that eventually makes its way to the lake and creates the algae blooms and so on and so forth. But the grass itself, there is an environmental benefit to the grass because it does provide a filter. The grass does slow things down. It's just not as good as the natural plantings and the shrubs. Now, Ben, why don't you follow up on that?
Yeah, well, as Darren said, the main purpose of the detention basin at this point is for stormwater management and sediment control. Whether it's riprap or grass or stone or natural plantings, the sediment is ultimately designed to settle within the detention basin itself. That's why it's the wet basin. In the event that the city is responsible for doing additional control for phosphorus and nitrates and some other things that may be coming down the pipeline here, the natural plantings along the side slope have shown evidence to help mitigate that concern, and those plants soak up that nutrient before it gets into the water system and does cause those additional concerns downstream. So coming from a sediment control standpoint, the basin itself with the water and the standing water, it's designed to settle to the bottom of the basin with eventual maintenance that as the basin becomes less, the capacity decreases because the sediment's filling up, then it would then have to be taken care of in that regard. But again, the natural plantings are designed to help slow that process. So you are right in that regard, but the basin itself is what is designed to control that sediment.
But then the riprap that remains there is not necessarily going to cause problems with the detention basin becoming unsightly as some of the examples you showed.
It is still, the business owner or the property owner is still responsible for maintaining it, such as they would for any landscaping bed. Any landscaping bed that's even around the front with the mulch or the stones, there's still going to be weeds that grow up there. The property owner has expressed his willingness to, and he's actually required to maintain his site, so he would be maintaining that riprap, making sure it's nice and clean, consistent with what it's supposed to be designed to do, and that's not have the weeds or anything growing within there. If he at some point decided to promote the natural plantings and things and remove those stones, we would still be welcome to that. That's something that would still be fine, but he would be at a minimum required to maintain the landscaping around it and the riprap, basically keep it free of those invasive species, the cattails, the things that were not intended to be growing within that stone.
Kathy, all basins are going to get that, especially the riprap ones. It just becomes so apparent because that dark against the white, you can just see it. Because all those basins, eventually, they're going to get that accumulation. Why we like, on the planning end and the staff end, why we like to have those naturally planted ones is because it is, we like the environmental impact, we like the environmental aspects of it, but we also like the aesthetic aspects of it. That's why we push it, especially in the front yard areas. When you have these basins in the front yards, we always want them to be kind of more landscape, kind of similar to, think about, when we're doing the parking lots. We always want some nice landscaping around that parking lot to kind of soften the look of the parking lot. That's what a lot of reasons, there's not a lot of environmental benefit per se to that parking lot to having that line of trees and shrubs along it, other than that it increases the aesthetic quality of it. So just one of those, and it's something that we've consistently recommended in planned development areas.
Stephen and I have something after that.
Thank you. This is kind of a follow-up to what David said, and Jeff, my one concern is resources are limited, staff time is limited, and, a plan was approved, it was not followed, so we're back to the drawing board, which is consuming staff time that should be spent on other projects. So this is my one concern. I think, how do we prevent this from happening in the future? Are there penalties when this, I don't know what it costs the taxpayer to have you guys go back to the drawing board and all this stuff. Well, it may not happen a lot. I think we have to put some safeguards in it doesn't repeat itself.
And I would add to that, you're basically, with the natural plantings, you're creating a garden. Gardens require work. And I think it's important that the petitioners understand that if there's this standard, it's like the ones at the university, you go 3 weeks without weeding in a rainy summer period, it's going to look awful. And it's just, people need to understand it's going to cost money on everybody's part to keep this stuff up. Garrett.
Yes. If these recommendations are approved, there's still going to be riffraff. How long or deep is this riffraff going to be? It's going to be 2 feet above the water line, but how much underneath the water line is it going to be? Down to the bottom of the basin, or are we talking about 5 feet or 10 feet? Do you have an answer for that?
I don't know specifically whether the riprap has been installed all the way at the bottom of the basin itself. I do know that it is on the side slopes currently and on the safety shelf. We would allow him to still maintain that riprap on the safety shelf, which is below the water line, and then the 2 feet above the water line. Whether it's in the center of the pond, without draining it down or looking at it, we're not able to
I
tell.
don't think that's necessary for you to go down there and see if it's down there. The second question is related to condition 3 and 4. It says additional trees and shrubs. Is that according to the landscaping code, or is that something in addition to the landscaping code?
Every spot within the developments, in any development, there's certain requirements for landscaping. This is to bring that front street side facade up to the landscaping requirement, and then we also increased some landscaping. As mentioned in the previous staff report on July 1st, he actually does have the appropriate amount of trees. He's actually over by 1 tree in the requirement for the landscaping, but they weren't placed in the right spot. That's why we're looking back and we're requiring additional trees on the front yard, because they were not placed there initially. Same with the landscaping in that front bed. We're increasing that landscaping to help bring that front area in compliance around the detention basin, and also to provide additional screening.
Okay, I guess my additional question then is, are there specific locations for these trees or shrubs to be on the property? Who's going to pick the location of these trees?
We do have requirements on where landscaping is supposed to be.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay,
we-
that's fine. No more
Any other
questions.
technical questions? John?
Just should be relatively simple. Approximately how many feet of riprap do we have right now on these sides that are really wide? Is that, it looks like about 8 to 10 feet.
it's actually closer to 12 to 14 feet total.
So
He's removing
but we're
10 to 12 feet.
significantly reducing.
Correct.
The amount of riprap that's there.
Correct.
Which, okay, I'll talk about
Okay.
that later.
Any other technical questions? We've covered a lot of ground here. Okay, anyone here from the audience to speak to this item today? All right, seeing none, back to the commission. Go ahead, David.
Is the owner here?
I believe so.
Could he come forward?
Sure. Yeah, would you willing to answer a couple questions? Thank you.
It's 21, and I represent a bigger comb shop in ZBW.
David.
I think that without rehashing old stuff, do you agree to do what the conditions are and also to maintain the landscaping and detention pond?
Yes, I agree with what the staff has put out for the terms. And taking care of it is very important to me. That's why this whole thing happened, is to make it beautiful, better looking in my eyes and other people's eyes. And that's how this whole issue started. And also, I noticed some of the pictures that were shown up there, the ones that didn't look very good that had riprap were based off of people not taking care of it. So I would not allow that to happen.
All right, I don't want any misunderstandings that sometime down the road they say, well, no, I didn't know what I agreed to, or that we don't have a repeat of why we're here now.
No, everything will be taken care of as specified.
Thank you.
Good point. Other questions for the petitioner? Just a comment, thank you. I mean, I realize we got on you last time for not following the conditions, but thank you for working with the city. I was afraid when this was on our agenda that we were going to be doing the landscape plan somehow here, which I dreaded. So thanks to the city staff for helping put this together with you, and thank you for...
And I thank you for, working with me.
Sure. Anybody else in the audience here to speak to this item today? Okay, seeing none, back to the commission. Kathy?
I remain unhappy.
All right, we
I
hate to
think a
hear
lot of us
that.
are. I would strongly prefer that natural plantings be used instead of turf grass. So I know the petitioner doesn't like that idea, but it would be a strong preference.
You going to make a motion to amend?
Because this was a compromise that was arrived at. So I won't make a motion. I'm not happy, but I don't know what choice we have. So I will support it.
Carolyn and John?
I share David's concerns from the very beginning about, the protocol or the precedent we're starting here, I guess would be a better way of putting it. And that's why I voted for denial the first time around. But it goes to the city council, and the city council decided that it was acceptable within the policy realm for this reconsideration that's in front of us right now. And with that in mind, I'm in support of what the reconsideration is. And if you're ready, I'll make a motion.
Can we hear from John first?
Compromise usually means both sides feel like they came away with something, both sides feel like they lost something. Looking at this, I think, we've seen what the petitioner wanted to have out there, and we're significantly reducing the amount of riprap. We're getting in some landscaping where he's said he's going to have to maintain it, which is him giving in. I mean, it seems like there's been a lot of give and take in this, and that's exactly what the city council was looking for when they requested compromise. So I will definitely be in support of this, not to set a precedent, but because this is what the city council wanted us to do. They wanted us to compromise. So
It wasn't Steve personally, but...
yeah. Well, he's our council representative, so.
Am I hearing someone wanted to make a motion?
I so move we accept.
Okay,
Or
moved
approve.
and seconded
With
by
conditions.
Carl. With conditions?
With conditions, yes.
Any question on the motion? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Weigert,
Aye.
Rollenberger,
Aye.
Borzak,
All right.
Holmes,
Aye.
Vince,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Pop. Ray,
Aye.
Whitehead.
Aye.
Motion carried, 9-0.
Thank you. Let us move on to the final item today, item number 4, text amendment to the zoning ordinance establishing a shoreland overlay district, pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also going to pass around something that'll be relevant at the end of this, so pass this around to you guys. There's more than we need there. But this is actually, we had a workshop probably, I'd say 2 months ago, talking about the ability for cities to have their own shoreline overlay or own shoreline district. So that's what we're coming forward with now is actual text to be added to the zoning ordinance in an empty slot that we have in there already that would establish a shoreline overland district. I put it in here.
This looks familiar.
Just a second.
Just deja vu.
He's showing water.
Yeah, it's a bad dream. It keeps coming back.
I saw David working on it. I know he's got it.
I'm just going by. I thought maybe they got out of order or something.
What's out of order?
Well, let me I will just talk without the graphics right now. So basically, give you a little bit of background information. The Wisconsin state statute direct counties, all counties within the state, to zone all shoreland areas within their jurisdiction, basically for the purpose of navigable water protection laws, also to promote sort of the catch-all public health safety and general welfare. Those requirements applied to all unincorporated areas, so all of your towns and unincorporated areas, but also apply to any villages or cities or any areas attached or annexed to villages and cities after May 7th, 1982. Keep going. Go forward.
Jeff says it's here.
See
Well,
if
keep
they're
talking.
see if they're hidden. See if they're hidden, Jeff.
We can listen.
So anyway, so Winnebago County does have a shoreline zoning district in their zoning code under Chapter 27, more specifically Chapter 27.5, which is attached in your packets. And that area, and there it is. Is it hidden?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Somebody hid my slides. Anyway, so the Winnebago County has that regulation in effect right now, and it regulates all shoreline areas. I'll get to what those are, but they do affect areas within the city limits for areas that were annexed or attached to the city after 1982, after May 7th of 1982. May 7th, yes. The county, however, does not enforce those. The city is required to enforce those on the county's behalf, which is fine. That is one thing we do enforce and administer those regulations. But in December of last year, the state of Wisconsin enacted Wisconsin Act 80, and that basically allowed incorporated areas, meaning cities or villages, to enact a shoreland ordinance of their own. And what that does, provided the city the ability to have some flexibility on some of the requirements that counties don't have. So when 2013 Wisconsin Act 80 came out, also a model code was sent out by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities that if you're interested as a village or a city of adopting your own code, this is what you can use. So we basically redrafted a section of our zoning code based partially on that model, primarily on that model, and then also using the existing Winnebago County code to make sure everything was there. Good, that the county has currently. So let me kind of go over this. So right now, the existing shoreline regulations, which are the county codes, define shoreline areas. This is going to be exactly the same as they're still defined. They're defined in the state statutes as 1,000 feet off the ordinary high water mark of any navigable lake, pond, or flowage, also within 300 feet of the ordinary high water mark of any navigable river or stream, or to the landward side of the floodplain, whichever distance is greater, and that actually goes with both the lake to the floodplain counts towards that. So that's the definition of shoreline. So when you look on the map, which is kind of washed out here, but you have very small copies in your packets, the gray area on the map in the city limits are outlined in this dark blue line. The gray areas are parts of the city that are pre-1982. So they're regulated, but they're regulated per general zoning code. So example would be a 25-foot rear yard setback, which would be the shoreline setback. Anything that's outside of that area that's shaded green, which is going to be your navigable waterways or your floodplain areas, the green or the reds, those have the county's 75-foot setback right now that's enforced on those lots. So if you're want to build a house or a business on a shoreline lot right now, it was annexed after 1982, you have a 75-foot setback off of that high water. And that's just kind of the way it sits. Oops. And it also regulates, so you have a 75-foot for most structures, does allow you to go 35-foot setback for very small open structures, like patios without any walls or fire pit areas or something like that. It's got to be less than 200 square feet in area, and it has to create or maintain a vegetative buffer. It's either maintain one that's there already, or you have to recreate it to put something within that, up to that 35-foot mark. And then also, as I had mentioned, requires the vegetative buffer, or vegetative zone is what it's called, to be retained or installed if it's not there currently. But it does allow you for every 100 foot of shoreline frontage to basically cut a 30-foot open swath as a viewing area or an access area, just an open area along that shoreline. So that's current regulations of the code. Again, there was the map. We redrafted the code. There are very few changes that are allowed in Act 80, but there's some significant ones, and it really breaks down to basically 3. But the code that you have is 3051, and it's subsection 1 through 6. The first section is very simple. It's just the authorization and purpose statement. It references the state statute, gives the reasons for the establishment of the code, and you have that in your packet. So, I mean, you can take a look at it. I'm not going to go over every section. If you have questions, let me know. Definition section defines item relative to the overlay. Now, these are also located in the zoning code as well, but they're reiterated here. Includes structures, just generally anything permanently fixed to the ground, basically. Principal structures, accessory structures. There is a new one in this code called subordinate structures. Defines shoreline and shoreline setback areas. The next one is uses, defines permitted and conditional uses in the overlay district. What you'll notice, it basically says whatever in the underlying district is permitted. It allows other certain things like trails, dredging, and that kind of stuff. For general provision, that is really kind of basic. It's a lot of your legalese, talks about compliance, restrictiveness. If other codes are more restrictive, they apply. Interpretation, that, how do you interpret ordinary high water mark? How do you interpret sections of the code? And it defines the district boundaries, which I kind of went over before. The next section is the one where there's the most significant change, and that's setbacks. It's 51.5. And this regulates the distance structures can be placed from that ordinary high water mark of the shoreland area. That includes principal structures, accessory structures. In our code, which is different than the county code, boathouses are called out, and subordinate structures are called out as different. So I'll get to the changes. You'll see that those are a little bit different. And then the last section just defines that vegetative buffer that's required to be maintained, and also shows, gets into the detail about the clear area per 100 feet, the 30 feet per 100 feet. So really I want to go over the big changes, and I have 3 of them that are here. The first one is setback for structures. The big change in this code is the state said, okay, cities, you only have to have a 50-foot setback for your structures. Counties and unincorporated areas got to be 75 feet. But cities, if you want to reduce it to 50, you can reduce it to 50. If you don't want to, you could leave it at 75. But we saw this as an opportunity to say, well, we get a little bit of reduction. We're a little more urban, not as much space. A lot of lots need to utilize that extra 25 feet of land, because the lot depths aren't as great as they would be on a big half-acre lot somewhere, or acre lot somewhere. So that allows us to go down to a 50, which we had done. It also provided a lineup provision in the code for infill lots. So if you had a principal structure on both sides of you and you're an empty lot, you could then bring your principal structure up, or your structure period, up to that line that averages of the two others. And I'm going to get into a graphic in a second that shows that. Not allowing you to go any closer than 35, because the statutes say you can't be any closer than 35. So it allows you to pull that up. So if your two neighboring houses are at 35 feet, you could also pull yours up to 35, where the county code does not have that right now. We also have setbacks specific to boathouses. Makes sense. Boathouses are kind of water dependent. So what our code allows, one boathouse per residential lot. That's in our zoning code, regular residential zoning district. And it allows it to be 3 feet from the ordinary high water mark and from the side lot lines. It limits its size to 500 square feet, and it has to be oriented towards the water. Some people try to get around by putting a garage there. They put a garage door on the opposite side of it. It's really not a boathouse. I say it's a boathouse. So it's got to be oriented to the water. Also, if you're doing the boathouse, it can't be in that vegetative buffer zone, which is sort of the natural shoreline protection area as defined by the DNR. And then another new regulation that's added in our code is subordinate structures. And subordinate structures are kind of a new thing. It's not in our zoning code. It's only listed here. But it's basically uninhabited structures on the same property as a principal structure, and it includes things that are incidental and customary to the principal use of the property. And so they include, not limited to, things such as at-grade patios, decks that don't have any sides or any walls, fencing, retaining walls, landscape features, flag poles. These are all structures. And if you follow the hardcore regulation, they would have to be held back in our new code 50 feet, in the county code 75. In a lot of cases, that's kind of drastic. So we put it in our code that those would be allowed to go up to the 35-foot mark, which is what the state says at that point it needs to be protected. So we threw that in, also like temporary fixtures that aren't there all year round, you know, a tent or something like that. And then also kind of threw the catch-all in the definition, similar improvements as determined by the community development. So that is a drastic difference. Again, we follow the same county code that we said can't be greater than 200 square feet in area, and that buffer area be maintained. So you can't be chopping out the buffer zone to put in your flagpole, so to speak. You have to put it in your clear area. After all that kind of came in, we talked to a property owner who has a shoreline property. Developed it back in the time when the 75-foot setback was required. So most of the houses in his subdivision, or in that subdivision, have houses set back at 75 feet. He'd come in with concern, saying, well, 50 feet is all great, and I think people should be able to go closer to the shoreline. But the problem is, we all developed at 75 feet. If you let somebody go at 50, you're kind of destroying our view, which they don't own the lot, but they had assumed everybody was going at 75. And came up with a very good suggestion that's not in your staff report, but I gave you in the handout and also have up on the screen. And staff is in support of this change, so it would be changing what you have in your draft code potentially to this. You'd have to change it to this, but basically, instead of allowing that lineup provision for infill lots to reduce as little as 35 feet, what that lineup would now do is require you to match your neighbors, but be no greater than 75, because that was the old code before, and no less than 35. So if an example would be if all your neighbors on both sides were set back at 60 feet, you're going to have to pull your house back at the 60-foot mark. Obviously, there's the Board of Appeals, and there's other avenues to get around that if there's hardships. But it would cause basically that. So what we did is change that section of the code on your supplement and also on the screen to basically say, as it did before, all structures except both houses and subordinates would have a 50-foot setback from the high water mark. And then an adjustment to the shore yard may be greater or less than the 50 feet if the two things apply. The principal structure is constructed on a lot that is immediately adjacent to buildings on both sides, lots on both sides. And then that principal structure must be constructed at a distance that's either greater to or equal to the average setback of your neighboring buildings. On the adjacent lots, however, can't be closer than 35 feet, and we're not going to require it to be greater than 75. If your neighbors happen to build 200 feet back off of the shore, we're not going to say you have to go 200 feet. We would do the 75, which is what the previous setback required. And this graphic is the same graphic you have on your supplemental sheet that I passed out, and it kind of shows this situation. So in this case, you have a shoreline, you have 3 shore front lots. One house was built with a 50-foot setback, Another house was built with an 80-foot setback. The guy comes in to build the middle lot. Now, the way it's drafted in your original one would say you can go down up to as low, up to the 50-foot mark. So you'd be able to go down to 50 feet. This gentleman would say at that point, I'm getting hardships happening to me. So what this lineup provision would do would be take that average, which ends up being 65 feet, and you'd have to build either at that average or further back. Obviously, as these lots, if you use different calculations, that average is going to change. But basically, this is a little different than we're saying. It would require that lineup provision. You've seen that same kind of thing for front setbacks in our zoning code, but this one would be for the shoreline setback. So that's a little bit different, and it's something you didn't have in your packet, so you couldn't digest. But it kind of came in after the reports were made to staff. It made a lot of sense to do the lineup. Obviously, if the lot's not buildable, you can go to the Board of Appeals saying, I can't build it with this average setback. They could look at the facts at that point and give a variance or not. But I guess that's the concept. Otherwise, pretty much everything in this code is going to be identical to your county code, a little bit less detailed because the county code gets into what needs to be submitted and what processes you have to go through. That's built into our municipal code in other places. But we see this change and adoption of our own code to be very beneficial to the landowners, the shoreline landowners of the city. As I had said before, it's going to allow a lot more area of lots to be utilized. That lineup provision for consistency, I think, is important. It's probably going to solve a lot of people's issues, especially as amended. That might happen. We had to do 75. Now this guy's coming in and going 25 in front of us. Allowing that 35-foot for subordinate structures is going to solve a lot of issues of people wanting to do very minor things in their yards. And then also, from our standpoint, it's a lot easier to regulate shoreline regulations when there are in our own municipal code. To tell people to go check the county code and then get back to us. Go talk to the county, get the code, find where it is, get interpretations on it. Once it's in our code, it's kind of all in our hands. And so even though we're regulating it now, being in our own code, the ability to put it in our own municipal code is nice. It's going to be, in my opinion, much more efficient and user-friendly to the customer and the staff. And I guess with that, staff is recommending that the Plan Commission recommend that the Shoreline Overlay District be established with the Oshkosh Zoning Code Chapter 30 with amendment, if you feel it's appropriate, that last amendment that I added here that's not in the actual draft code.
All right, thank you, David. Technical questions? Carl, Steve, Jeff, Kathy, Gary. Carl, Steve, Jeff. Okay.
Help me understand why the ordinance does not apply to areas incorporated prior to 1982?
I believe in 1982 is when the DNR established that setback condition.
That was when the law came into place in '82, so they didn't make it apply to retroactively to every area that was already incorporated.
But you wouldn't just have pre-existing conditions. You actually take all the unincorporated area and exclude it.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Well, usually I'm used to it. Well, okay, you adopt a new ordinance, and it doesn't affect anything that's already built. But in this case, you're taking unincorporated or incorporated areas and totally excluding them.
Correct.
Well, it's excluded now, and I think the reason why they did that is you had a lot of areas that were already incorporated into the cities that were already developed with a much less setbacks, so they didn't want to go. You saw David's picture whereas you'd have a normal 25-foot setback. They didn't want to make everybody then all of a sudden push it back 75 feet. So they said, okay, everything that's coming in, that's probably rural now. It's going to be urban. Now we want it to be under this set of rules.
Now that's making some sense. Okay.
Yeah, and keep in mind the smaller lots that developed back in the day. There's a lot of shoreline lots in Milwaukee and Oshkosh, Green Bay, Madison that are not very deep. If you required a 75-foot, I suspect they would become unbuildable.
Okay.
Steve?
A couple of things. First of all, I think that line of provision is a great idea.
I agree.
It's going to maintain property values and probably eliminate a lot of headaches here. A couple of things. The mention of a boathouse. Are these new boathouses? Because the DNR doesn't want boathouses anywhere.
Well, there's a difference. The DNR doesn't like boathouses on the water. These are actually buildings on your property that store a boat. So you could, they're on the shore. You put your boat in it, you could drag it off into the water. It's not a like a boat livery or something like that where you would drive in.
Would that allow, are they allowing 4 tracks to bring a boat up into a boathouse?
Yeah, well, it's going to be at 3 feet from the high water mark, so it's going to be pretty close.
That's not surprising. The other thing is, there's very little vacant land in the green area. How will this affect tear downs? In other words, people are going to buy an older home, tear it down. Is it basically starting from scratch? They don't have to build in the same footprint anymore? They can do the...
Right, yeah, if they tear down and want to rebuild, they would have to follow the new shoreline setback or get a variance if they can't do it because of the lots.
Just one more, with the vegetation, now, again, there's very little vacant land in this area. I don't recall seeing a lot of vegetation other than, a lot of willow trees have started to grow on their own. Can the property owner take down some of the willow trees and some of the scrub that has come up on the shorelines?
Well, how the code is written is that they would have to remove dead or invasive species, which is basically how it's regulated now. But they couldn't take down, except for that view area, actual shoreline plants. Except, again, in that 30 feet per 100. So right now they're supposed to clear out those invasive and dead plants and either reestablish or replant. What these codes do is basically say if you want to get closer than that 50 feet, you're going to come in and say you're going to do it. And then it's up to us to go and regulate.
Jeff?
Yeah, I've been going through this because I've been looking for land. If you have an existing structure that's there and you tear down the structure but you leave the foundation, you're fine. Tear out the foundation, you got to hit the setbacks, because I've been talking to Winnebago about this quite a bit. So that's why I was going to ask about the grandfather issue. But and to your point on the willow trees and stuff, you can't take out anything that's living, and that's why I'm wondering. Did you talk to the DNR, the county, about this at all? Because the county told me that DNR is looking at changing their regulations on this vegetative buffer and actually increasing that vegetative buffer.
We did talk to the county, and the model code we used was drafted by the league and by the DNR. We did talk to the county on it, and one thing you'll notice in here, we don't define that vegetative buffer.
Right.
I have sheets and sheets and sheets of describing what is appropriate and what type of soil types for what type of vegetative buffers, but we didn't put it right in the code partially for that reason, is that can change.
Well, the only thing I bring it up is one of the reasons I didn't pull the trigger on one of the lots is because if they increase that vegetative buffer before I started to build, which is like 2 years from now, and this law is supposed to go into effect 2016, but the county said that most counties are dragging their feet on this because they haven't got real full definition from the DNR. I could buy a piece of property that I can't build on, or at least build where I want to build.
That's the kicker.
and have that occur. The other one that I see, but it appears that if we can go, if there's an appeal that can be made, that's fine, because again, I've seen some lots that I've looked at where you have a structure that was built years ago, probably the only one out there, and it built way back here. This guy built way up here, and now with this average, I have to build way up here, which is 100 feet from.
Well, but no greater than 75, which is the current regulation. So we would never require more than a 75-foot setback. So you'd never be penalized with our code, our city code, more than the county code is requiring. And that's important to say that's why there's a separate line that one says require and the other one says will allow you to.
But as long as there's an exception process where you can go, like you said, if everybody built at 60 feet here, but they built, that could limit the type of building or structure that you can build.
Definitely, and some lots may not be buildable using the averaging setback or the required 75-foot we have now or the required 50. And that's really what the Board of Appeals is there for, to find a hardship. If the property's not usable for a permitted use, that's what they're there to evaluate and give variances. Now, if it's just because, I can't speak for the board, but if it's just because you don't want to place it in a place that would allow it, they may not give you the variance for that.
The
'cause
rest,
it's more
the rest of the county code's gonna be enforceable because it's within 1,000 feet of the shoreline, correct?
outside of the city.
Because they have rules on the amount of impervious you can build, and
Yep.
things of that nature, which also then causes problems.
Yeah, and that's
Still,
chapter
especially if you got a
27
deep
in the Winnebago Code.
Okay.
They have a couple other ones,
Kathy
too.
and then Gary.
Looking at this map, it looks like very little is going to be affected by this. What's going to be affected?
The
Well,
yellow. The yellow.
Everything that's in this kind of greener
Oh, yeah.
area, everything in yellow is in the city, but annexed after 82. But these green areas, and it's kind of hard to see, you can see them stretching up along the creeks and along the Lake Butamore, all the way down. A lot of this is, cemetery and areas that aren't going to develop that way. But along all of these creekways and these navigable waterways, they would be affected. And a lot of them right now are farm fields or empty.
Oh, so all the green,
All
if
the-
it's in the city,
all
would
the-
be affected.
All the green, if it's in the city, would be affected. So as we annex or get attachments and we grow, those areas will come into the city. Right now, they're still affected, but they have the county 75 feet. Once they come into the city, they would drop down to a 50.
Let Jeff just, might be able to show up a little bit better. You can see all the green areas of our shoreline zoning's in effect, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so all these areas are the areas where, that would be impacted by, as it comes into the city. So if it's in the city here, which is incorporated, the rule changes in these areas. Now, as we grow out, all these areas will then be applied to the.
And navigable waterways also.
Yes,
Yes.
this is all, everything you're covering, everything.
Skinny
you're
little
seeing-
creek.
Yep,
means
that's a
sometimes
navigable
Sawyer
waterway.
Creek's
Yes,
not this.
that's correct. So all this is Sawyer Creek coming out here, so all those areas along Sawyer Creek.
Toothpick boat.
300 feet from every stream and 1,000 feet from lakes and ponds.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Gary?
Yes, I have several quick questions and hopefully quick answers. Do we need to change the official map because if we approve this amendment?
Nope, it's an overlay, so the definition, we will have a map in our office, but you don't have to
not
change
the-
the official map. As an overlay, it's going to apply over the top of our zoning map.
Okay, second question. There's several places here where it's a reference to the Director of Community Development for deciding on various issues. And I was wondering why that is and why it should not be, say, similar to,
Thank you.
there those be lights. Why it couldn't be similar to, say, the zoning administrator, where it would say the Director of Community Development or designee?
Yeah, back, not that, I guess not that long ago, but kind of long ago, they used to use zoning administrator for everything. The zoning administrator is actually a designee of the Director of Community Development. So in this case, we changed that to go to the highest person in that department, Director of Community Development, or their designee. And the reason we use these, because some of these things are kind of judgmental and may change. Like Jeff had mentioned, the what's considered appropriate for a vegetative buffer today might change in 5 years. So the Director of Community Development or staff, planning staff in this case, can look at what's the most appropriate. We say, no, it's got to meet these standards by the DNR or whoever comes up with them. If they want to challenge that, they can then go to the Board of Appeals and say you're interpreting the code incorrectly.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that the proposed amendment just has the Director of Community Development, period, without any designee. But anyhow, let's go on to the next question. On page 4 in item E, where it's a subordinate structure, in the third line, it says temporary fixtures not permanently affects to the ground that are in place less than 90 days per year. how is that going to be enforceable?
Well, right now we require temporary use permits for those same type of operations.
Oh,
Let's say
okay.
let's say you're going to have a wedding and you put up a big tent and you're going to have porta potties and whatnot, and they're only going to be there for a week. That would be a temporary structure that's less than 90 days. But it is a structure because it's permanently fixed there.
Okay. Next question is, at least in my own mind, I'm confused, and I admit I get confused easily. On page 4, item F, with page 6, item G, in regards to the definition of shoreland. It seems like there's more detailed definition on page 6 than on page 4, and it's a little bit confusing, at least in my mind, that is occurring. And I was just wondering if the staff should take a look at that and maybe modify it to clarify it before sending it to the Common Council if this is approved. Also, in the regular definitions, in the current zoning code, definition 146 has a definition of shoreline, which is a little bit different than either of these two. And again, I think it's important to be very specific in regards to there's no confusion in regards to what people are talking about. I think I have one more. Hang on for 1 second. I guess I'm wrong. Mr. Chairman, I guess that's all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Jeff?
Yeah, I got one question, David. When I just was reading that definition that Gary brought our attention, does this affect retention ponds?
No, be excluded unless they're directly connected to a navigable waterway.
And that's why I'm thinking out the one out west, out on 91.
Clairville?
That's got Sawyer Creek coming into it.
James Road, yeah.
And then Sawyer Creek going out. Sawyer Creek's a navigable waterway. So does it affect something like that?
I would have to check, but that may be included.
And same thing where you have Sawyer Creek coming in down, where we may then create a retention pond that's well after 1982 that now affects those adjacent homes. Okay? Because
the setback?
Yeah, it affects those adjacent homes. Now you're creating a setback issue that if somebody, to Mr. Cummins' point, wanted to tear down that structure and rebuild it,
I think that
is that creating a problem? Now, I understand maybe the retention pond that maybe we have over in Westlake wouldn't, okay, because it's really not connected to any navigable waterway. And then you kind of get into a definition of what is a retention pond or what is actually a man-made lake or pond that basically serves the same function. You can have a man-made reservoir that somebody puts as part of a development. It's basically a retention pond, but it's also a man-made lake. So I guess maybe that's a gray area that we have, but I know as we start to develop some of these retention ponds that we're doing, and that one I can think of right now, it's part of Sawyer Creek. That's a navigable waterway, and it's a pretty sizable place. And I'm sure we're going to probably have some others like that. Is that true? Do you think that we have some others maybe in the city that we may create that?
The Southwest Industrial Park, the existing section has a couple of basins that are immediately parallel to Sawyer Creek. They probably would.
So, and if that's the case, then that's any building that we have out in the Southwest Industrial Park that's within 1,000 feet is going to be in the shoreland district, and therefore are we creating some potential issues? And I don't know the answer to that.
I have a couple answers for you. First, with the boundaries, typically any of those lakes, navigable lakes, ponds, or flowages are going to be listed in the DNR surface water data sheets. Also, the rivers and streams are also going to be we're going to end up defaulting to what they tell us is navigable or not.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is if we create them after the fact.
Well, what I'm getting at is if you create them after the fact now, you have a 75-foot setback.
Okay.
If you do it after this ordinance, you have a 50.
But if
So
we-
either way, creating them, you may be creating the problem currently, whether you adopt this or not.
Right.
It's just what regulation applies to them. So yeah, you're right. If you create something that was annexed after 82, and it becomes considered by the DNR or the USGS, by the Geological Survey, to be navigable and to fall under the definition, you're going to be creating setbacks from it. It's something you should consider when creating detention areas, I suppose, or rerouting
And
streams
there may
or
be
whatever.
nothing- And there may be nothing we can do about that, and
Yeah.
I understand that. I'm just,
Yep.
that we may be creating that, and we just have to understand that
Yep.
we may be creating those pockets of existing
Changes.
landowners
It
that
changes.
now all of a sudden, when the DNR
does.
then puts in their new standards and say this is applicable to everybody for these for these buffers.
Well,
That's
and
a broader issue then. I mean,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
because
it
it's
is.
already in place.
It's already
I mean,
in place.
All right.
But the bonus is with this, at least you'd be reducing it by 25 feet. So,
Gary?
Yeah, I just have one other quick question. Has this ordinance, a proposed ordinance, been passed by the stormwater people?
no, except for the Department of Public Works.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we're perhaps creating a problem with that. Oh,
Well,
okay.
we talked internally about doing larger group meetings and that kind of thing, but what kind of stopped us from doing that is those regulations are in place right now. There's no new regulations coming here. What it's doing is actually reducing the dimensional requirements of existing regulations already. So rather than opening this up as a confusing, should we have a setback or not, we don't have the ability to change that. It's do we change it from 75 to 50? It's an actual reduction. So
Yeah,
kind of why we didn't do
I
that.
just think that maybe does 25 feet make any difference, but
Well-
I don't see that it has a problem
Okay.
with this.
Any other technical questions, which we've really worked this topic out? All right. Anybody here from public speak to this item today? Come on up, sir.
My name is Tom Zilgus. I live at 3815 Shorebird Court. I have a vacant lot next to me, and we're on somewhat of a waterfront with marsh ahead of us. And the way the state wrote that and said it was a 50-foot setback from everything now. Well, I was required, my neighbors, some of my neighbors that live right next to me, were required to sit back 75 feet. I paid $100,000 for my lot, for the view I had. I don't want another house next to me 25 feet out into my view. So I talked with Darren and David, and they come up with the idea, well, if the existing structures are 75 foot, the people that build there should be 75 feet. And I think that's awesome, that you guys and staff and David and Darren come up with that idea, and I'm totally for that. You know, I don't care, you know, if there's new subdivisions, they're 50 feet or whatever they are. I don't have any problem with that. But I don't want a house 25 feet closer to the water than mine. And I'm sure my neighbors don't either. And I got them all signed that want to keep it like that. So I thank you guys very much and staff for doing what you did. I'm totally happy about it.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else here to speak to this item today? I see nobody, so back to the committee.
Move to approve.
With the change?
With the
Change.
changes, right.
Who's our?
Seconded?
I think it was John. I think he got his.
No,
Carl.
I
Moved and
wasn't
seconded. If there's
I
no,
was just pointing out that we needed
if
this
there's
on
no
it.
discussion on the motion, then let's call the roll.
Iger,
Aye.
Ellenberger,
Aye.
Boysock,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Hens,
Aye.
Cummings,
Aye.
Ray,
Aye.
Bartek.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right. Unless there's some other business, and
Thanks again, everybody.
thank you. Been moved, seconded. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We're done.